Welcome to the After Chat. I'm Michael.
I'm Madison.
And today we are continuing our conversation on leaving a legacy.
Ooh.
You ready?
I sure am.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the After Chat. Real questions. Real talk. Real life.
So what is something that you learned recently that is very interesting?
I'm so glad you asked. I have a fun fact, and it's bird related.
Love it.
I know you're partial to birds. There is a hummingbird. I can't remember where they live, but there is a type of hummingbird that exists. That's body proportions are. It's like beak is so long it can't actually like groom itself with its beak. It has to scratch with its legs because
Really?
its beak is so long. Yeah.
Like a dog. It just sits down and scratches.
Yeah, it just kind of has to like fluff through its feathers with its feet. Yeah. It's really funny looking too because you're so used to seeing hummingbirds look normal. This one is like 2 times as long as like maybe even longer.
I'm so curious.
I can't remember. It had like a name or whatever. It was a random like YouTube like nature documentary like compilation of different stuff, and I just was watching it and saw extra long hummingbird nose.
That is crazy. I'm going to find that after we're done.
Yeah.
Because I want to see.
It was really
I want to
cute.
see a hummingbird like perch.
Maybe I can find a picture to show of this particular type of hummingbird or a little clip of it.
Love it.
Grooming itself with its talons.
So I learned today that octopuses have 3 hearts. I had no idea. One heart pumps blood to the gills while the other 2 pump it to the rest of its body.
They're not really that big. It's surprising that they need that like multiple hearts to take care of their blood.
Some of them get right big, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, you
I
usually
guess
see them get themselves in and out of jars and things like those ones are small.
Well, I think of them as maybe more compact than they are because I know they can like slither into just about anywhere.
Yeah.
They kind of freak me out a little bit. They're like too
100%.
smart. Yeah.
They do weird, surprising things.
Yeah. I don't totally vibe with like a lot of sea creatures in general. I get freaked out a little.
No, the
easily.
deeper you go, the more weird and bizarre looking they are. Like there's one that has a stem thing off its head with a little light on it. Like you get into all the bioluminescent things that trick things and
crazy.
No, it's spooky down there.
It is. I don't want to explore any of it.
How far out in the ocean do you go? Like, when you go to the beach? I really don't go past knee high.
I'm not a strong swimmer.
Oh.
I'm like so I laugh because like I was given strict instructions growing up to go no deeper than like, mid thigh at the most because I'm not a strong swimmer and my family knows that about me. So not deep at all. I'm not interested. I'm also really not interested in ever being in a body of water that I can't like see if there's something near me. So like Virginia Beach in particular is like, pretty murky, like darker water. Yeah, if there's like something that's like swimming by me in a lake or something, I want to know so I can get out of there because I don't mess with creatures in the water.
Well, I mean, if you're in like if there's lots of people there's not going to be a whole lot of things swimming in and about.
I don't care. I'm still not interested.
Fair enough.
I'm not into it. I will swim in a pool.
Where you can see your feet.
Yes.
Got you. All right. So what is the most unusual thing that you ever collected growing up?
I don't know. Okay. I don't know if I still have this anymore, but I had like this container that was full of insane different types of buttons, like the coolest buttons you could think of. And I inherited most of them from this really sweet older lady who went to the church that I grew up at. And when she heard that I was collecting buttons, she was like, "Let me give you something," and it was
I
like
got something for you.
it was like a full like container, like a sort of like a I don't know, like a makeup container or something that she
Mhm.
had repurposed, and it was like I don't know, buttons with teddy bears on them and buttons in weird shapes, and so it's not a weird thing to collect, I think.
No, like
But the
I've seen
fact that
people
I
that
had
collect
such
buttons.
variety, I'm sure I still have it somewhere, the box of buttons, but like I could pull out some really there was one that was just like a stork with like holding a little baby in it, but it still functioned as a button,
Yeah.
like all kinds of random ones.
No, I've seen like people that were selling theirs on eBay back in the day.
Yeah, and not like pin buttons,
Yes.
like buttons on your
Like
shirt
buttons
too.
for
Yeah.
shirts,
But
jackets, all of those
I
things.
do also collect that's newer. I started collecting pins and like the badge style buttons more recently. And that's kind of fun to get weird ones.
So,
I have one that's
like the
like
little
a
pop buttons or like the enamel ones?
both of them. I
Okay.
like the pins and I like the ones that are like the enamel. One of them that I have is like it's a bib like a it's Garfield but like as a biblically accurate angel. That one's fun. I have the same thing with like a Furby. It's like a Furby but biblically accurate angel. Like I have a bunch of random pins and
Just
I
covered
really
with
like that.
eyes.
Yeah, literally, yeah. It's I think it's in my car actually. It's on my cardigan or something. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I like random trinkets for sure.
That tracks.
Yeah, yeah. What about you? What's an unusual thing you've collected before?
Back in whenever I was in high school and Star Wars Episode 1 came out, Pepsi
Mm.
did a soda can line
Oh,
of all of the characters that
oh,
were
that's
going to
cool.
be in it. There was like a Yoda, a Darth Maul, and a early version of C-3PO because we find out that Anakin was building him in Episode 1, and so it was across Pepsi, Mountain Dew, like all of them. It was I forgot how many there was, but there was right many of them, and
Mm.
so I collected those
It
during
seems like
that time.
that would have taken like work to pay attention for the ones that you were missing, or
Yes,
was it
it
hard to
was
get?
numbered, so
Oh,
you knew. I mean, you still had to hunt for the ones that you wanted.
yeah.
But no, I had the entire collection. I had a big shelf in my room, and I had all of them.
Do you remember which one was the hardest to find, or like the
Yoda,
last?
most
Really,
def.
that was the last.
That was I don't remember what number he was in the thing, but that one I did not get until nearly the very end.
That makes sense because if I like not being a super huge Star Wars, and I don't dislike Star Wars, but I'm not like I've watched them, but it's
Yeah.
not my thing. If I walked into a store and was gonna buy a Pepsi, Yoda would be the one I
Oh,
was
most
would
def.
go for. So that makes sense.
I think his was on a Mountain Dew since he was green. But I did pull up a picture of them. I just don't remember which one he was on. But no, so that was
Huh.
something weird that I collected. And you can yeah, like here's some on eBay, an entire collection of it. Well, that's just the Pepsi ones.
Oh wow,
$109,
dang,
$325. So yeah,
interesting.
that was a fun summer.
I love it. I've fallen down this like weird little rabbit hole of every once in a while when I do get on Instagram, I'll get on it and like immediately fall into the spiral of not shorts. What are they? Reels on
Yes.
Instagram, because that's why I can't get on Instagram because I have no self-control with short form content. But when I do fall down the little rabbit hole for a little bit, it keeps recommending to me these people who go to Disney and they do like the pin exchange for like, and it's a set, and like it's always one of them is the hardest one to find, but like apparently you can go up to most of the places in Disney and they have like a full board of badges and pins, and
Okay.
like the workers will wear like little like I don't know, little side bags that also have them on display.
Mhm.
And so you can go up and trade any of your pins for any of theirs. And that's like how you get the full set,
Ah.
is just slowly trading your way to it. And I don't know why it hooks me in, but something about like the satisfaction of like finding that last one that was the hardest to find,
Yes.
I think is cool.
And
It's
you're just
fun.
like, yes.
Yeah. I love it.
All right, so we're going to be talking about role models, or how, well, kind of sort of like Elijah in our first episode. We
Mhm.
looked at his mentor relationship that he had with Elisha, who
Mhm.
would have been the mentee. And so now we're going to be looking in this episode at Elisha,
Mhm.
and kind of how his story went when he took up the mantle and kind of struck out on his own. So did you have any role models growing up, or adults, or I mean, I'm Gen X, so like we was basically raised by TV. So,
Yeah.
um, any characters that you aspired to be like, or anything like that?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to grow up in a church that did have a really great student ministry. So quite a few of my role models growing up were at least once I hit middle school were the actual leaders of
Mm.
the youth group for my age group, and that was a great experience. I actually got to at one of their houses I got to watch my very first I call it a scary movie. It was not scary. It was Narnia, the second Narnia. No, the first one, but it was scary to me because of the intense, I'm in sixth grade, okay, super sheltered, had never watched anything scary. And that scene of Aslan, with all of the creatures around him, freaked me out. Anyways, so that was a good portion of my childhood. We also had really, really good family friends who were pastors. And
Mm.
that is a big reason why I ever wanted to be in ministry in the first place, was just being around their family and seeing what that was like for them. And then kind of getting more into the realm of the parasocial relationships of people that I looked up to.
Hmm.
There were my middle school and high school days were the heyday for really cool bands that were also Christian, but it wasn't worship music. It was
Okay.
this little it was this little era in Christian music where the cool thing to do was to be Christians in a band, in some people refer to it as the Christ core scene, or in that era. It was very, very
Is that
popular.
like Skillet and all those?
Yes, Skillet is would be the mainstream, kind of the one that got the biggest in that area, but there were a lot of other groups that were on the summer festival circuit that I
Okay.
got, because they were smaller, I got to meet them, and I got to be on barricade for their show. There were some of them who had girls in them, which was really cool. There was two in particular, two bands. They were one of them's called Super Chick. That was the first CD that I ever bought with my own money.
Okay.
Super Chick, and they were super alternative, girls just doing their own thing. I thought it was awesome. And then the other one is Barlow Girl, and they were a little bit more leaning towards worship. Anyways, just really cool girls and cool creative bands doing something that was their own style in a way that I really admired. And it was a fun thing to grow
Yeah.
up in, this world of kids openly getting to talk about their faith and also expressing themselves musically in a way that hadn't really been explored up until that point. To do
Yeah.
alternative Christian music was still pretty new. So
No, and that's really cool that you had that experience.
Yeah.
And that there was a space for that. So
Oh,
that way
yeah.
you didn't have to feel that way no one had to feel like, okay, well, I also like music, but
Yep.
there's not really anything for me there.
Yeah, I think the coolest part was just how much, my dad in particular was super supportive of my sister and I getting to go out and go to shows, because he knew how much how important music was to us. So he would bring his camping chair and he'd sit in the back of the festival having a great time by himself, and let me and my sister stand for 12 hours straight on barricade to
Love it.
try and see someone up close. So yeah, it was a great scene. There's a lot on the tail end of that era where there's quite a few people who have deconstructed their faith, and that is kind of sad to wrestle with, but for what it was in the era, it was a great experience.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Mine was just always, it will always be Grammy.
Mm.
Like she was such a good role model of someone who didn't always shove her faith down anybody's throat. Like she
Mm.
didn't do that to me. But she modeled and demonstrated what it looked like to live sacrificially
Mm.
and to aspire to make wherever she was a better place.
That's beautiful.
And so that's something that I've always sought to do. Well, not always. Like once I became an adult and got humbled by life, like that is something that I was like, Grammy was onto something.
Aw.
But it just floated around in my subconscious and then just kind of came back whenever I needed it. And I think that's one of the things that a good role model does. Like they teach lessons,
Mm.
like she taught lessons that didn't really that I didn't really appreciate at the time, but whenever I became an adult, I was like, Grammy knew.
Yeah.
Like she knew that I was going to need those lessons later.
I think that's like one of the reasons why I joke all the time about the fact that I like can't wait till I'm like a little old grandma, because that's like exactly who I want to be. I want to be someone who is very wise and knows exactly what to say at the right time and really lives it out in the way that I exist around other people. And I know that there's like a lot of work and a lot of years that go into getting there. So it'll come eventually, but I'm really excited to be the little old wise lady.
I think you're going to play that role very well.
Hopefully. I got some time, just a little bit.
Just time in the seat is all it takes.
Yeah, which is exactly what we're talking about.
Yes. And so, like I mentioned before, this is a part 2 episode, or a follow-up episode to our episode on leaving a legacy, where we looked at the mentor-mentee relationship between Elijah and Elisha. And so we looked at that episode from Elijah's perspective. And so now we're going to kind of flip the script. And, we saw Elijah mentoring someone and pouring into them. He literally came out of a tree line and threw his cloak onto him and said, here we go. And we left that episode where Elijah was pulled up into heaven on a fiery chariot, and Elisha was just there.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're going to pick this episode up here.
Yeah, so we'll pick up the story. This is in 2 Kings chapter 2. We can read. So right after Elijah is taken up, Elisha strikes the Jordan River with Elijah's coat. I think we did mention that last time. Almost like a he was trying to see, okay,
do I have it?
Do I have it? Is God with me? Is this the path that I'm still on?
Because whenever he left, he's like, what is it that you want? And he said a double portion of the Spirit that you have.
Yes.
And so that's where we're at.
So he's striking the river with the cloak in a similar way to what Elijah has done in the past. And the water parts again. And so this was Elisha's first act after receiving the mantle from Elijah fully. And it's like he's choosing to sort of like confront that almost like imposter syndrome head on and say, okay, is this it? And so he strikes the water and it parts. And that shows Elisha that he is able to follow Elijah's model, and he's can confirm that God's power is within him now, which I can imagine if I put myself in his shoes, like before actually like going to strike. And when you're like, do I have it? Like I would be so freaked out. And so to have to have the water react in the same way that it did for Elijah, I'm sure that was just like a sort of like a little bit of a relief, but also like a, oh boy, what now?
Yeah.
Like it's just got to be intimidating.
I mean, Elijah's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, he's gone. Like he can't call him up. He can't write him a letter. He can't do any of those things. And so now he's the guy. Like Elisha's now the guy.
And the Israelites are historically very needy people. So it's a big responsibility.
They really are. Yeah. And so before he went into town and started doing anything, he was right there. And he's like, okay, I'm just going to give this a shot. Yep. Like, do I have it? Can I do the things? And that was kind of God saying, I got you. I'm with you. You can do the things. Which
if I also think through how does this, apply in my past and how I've experienced things, sometimes getting thrown in the deep end a little bit was exactly what I needed. Like basically having to push comes to shove. Is this what I'm going to do? Yeah. It came through for me. So it's interesting to see his story kick off that way.
And that's cool if you've had somebody working with you for a little bit. Yep. Now, if someone just came along and said, hey, I really want to learn what you do. Like, would you help me? And you just said, absolutely, kid, watch this. And then just chucked him in the deep end.
No.
Like, that might not be.
I wouldn't want to do it for other people. Yes. When I say thrown in the deep end, I don't mean quite as much like, thrown in with no resources, no information, none of that. Just more like, now's the time, go do it. Yes. Like when I'm standing on the platform at our women's event and sharing my testimony publicly for the first time with a bunch of people in front of me, and I'm freaked out. I do feel a little bit thrown in the deep end, but
Yes.
the background of that is I have people helping me shape the
Yes.
words ahead of time, pouring into me. So not quite, maybe thrown in the deep end is not quite
Yes.
the right phrase to say, but pushing for now's the time. I
Like
got to
the
do it.
training wheels are off.
Yes,
You
that's a much better way to
you
say it.
can do this.
Yeah, I like that.
And so then he just gets right after it. So 5 verses after that, we're still in 2 Kings 2, but we're picking up in verses 19 through 22. And that's where we see Elisha kind of do some miracles that are similar to what he did. So he's still, in my mind, whenever I've been mentored and taught to do something, I try to stick as close to what I've been taught and not go outside of those lines.
Yeah.
And we kind of see that here. So the people of Jericho, like we just mentioned before, historically, the Israelites here in the Old Testament are a needy, fickle people. And so the people of Jericho come to Elisha with a problem. And and he's like, I've seen this, or I've heard about this. And the water is bad and the land is unproductive. And Elisha throws salt in the springs and declares healing over it. And we've seen stuff like that similarly before from Elisha, where he called down heaven and Elisha tosses salt in the spring. It's kind of it's different materials, but it's still the same kind of bold, thus say the Lord style confidence. And so he's still meeting practical needs. He's still doing the things, but he's kind of doing it in the same model and vein of Elijah.
Yeah, which is interesting, particularly with the fact that he so specifically asked for a double portion. I think it's really cool to see the beginning of his independent era mirroring Elijah so closely, and then you can kind of start to see him his reach branches out a little bit more, which we can see in 2 Kings 4. This is actually one of my favorite stories from the Bible. I don't know why it's always stuck out to me, but the widow with the jar of oil that he miraculously multiplies a widow's jar of oil in 2 Kings 4 verses 1 through 7, and that kind of mirrors Elijah's multiplication of flour and oil for the widow in Zarephath, and that's in 1 Kings chapter 17. So to see the mirroring and the similarity between the two miracles, I think you can start to see he's got the same passion that Elijah has to focus on the people who have these great needs. And then he jumps into in chapter 4 later on, verses 42 through 44, he feeds 100 men with 20 loaves and leftovers. And I think that one in particular is really cool because we can sort of see a similarity to Jesus's feeding huge crowds with a small amount of food. So Elisha is not just repeating miracles, but ministering with the same compassion and attentiveness to the marginalized as Elijah did. And so he's doing the same thing. He's doing what he was taught by Elijah, but his reach towards other people starts to be multiplied the further he goes in his career of ministry.
Yeah, and this is one of the more bizarre ones, I think. So we're still in chapter 4, and we're in verses 32 through 35, and Elisha raised someone from the dead. And this is something that Elijah did as well. And so Elisha raises a Shunammite woman's son, and he he just laid flat on top of him, like eyes to eyes, the whole 9 yards.
Which that's weird.
It is weird.
Yep.
And prayed and all the things, and ended up coming back to life. And Elisha did something similar. So it depends on how you're reading. He may have done it kind of the similar. So whenever you read Elijah, it says he laid himself flat over this boy 3 times and commanded him back to life. And so it depends on how you mentally imagine that.
Yeah.
But Elijah's operating in the same spirit of what
Mm.
Elijah did.
Mm.
You know, even if they might have been slightly different, but he's doing it the way that he's being prompted and led. So everybody's expression and worship and manner of doing things for God might be slightly different, but you're really going after, okay, is my heart in the right spot and in the same spot as the person who
Mm.
was bringing me up and showing me the way.
That's good. I think kind of similar to that as we continue down. This is in 2 Kings chapter 13, picking up in verse 20. Elisha's bones bring a dead man back to life when the man is thrown into Elisha's tomb. And it's pretty crazy that the anointing on him was so strong that like it continued to work even like
He's-
after at the end of his
yes.
career. He's still involved in a miracle. Power comes from God, obviously, but he's
Yes.
still involved in this miracle. So, I think it's kind of cool that we can see that Elijah went out, huge, crazy way on a chariot of fire. Nobody else has ever
Done that.
gone out that way. But in Elisha is like a little bit more significantly more subtle in the way that he goes out, significantly more. Like he has a natural death, but he still has that, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say, like a glimmer of something interesting about how he went out because he's still involved in a miracle once he had already passed away.
You know, I really think whenever I read that, it reminds me of, if you're faithful throughout your life,
Mm,
even after you're gone, there's still echoes of it. If you
yeah.
have poured into somebody else.
Yep.
And I think we see that really here. You know, Elijah spent time with this kid. He poured into him, raised him up, brought him along, taught him all the things. Elisha then went out and had his own ministry, his own spin on things. He
Mm,
didn't just do things the same way Elijah did. But even after he passed on, there's still a ripple effect
yeah.
of both of their faithfulness here.
Which is so cool to think of the way that, like, so Elijah's faith is so strong, and the Elisha, his faith, I mean, he responded very quickly to Elijah's call to follow him. Like he was all in right
All in
away.
from the get-go.
But I can imagine as his time with Elijah continued to go up until Elijah left, that his faith was increased. So
Yes.
like just thinking through the fact that your spiritual journey, your spiritual memory of what God has done for you is not just a part of your own story, but it continues down to the next person. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine there were several situations where Elijah was sitting and thinking, Elijah got through this.
Yes.
I can do it too. And then to see that impact of the presence of God being so strong in his life that he was also, involved in a miracle. I think it's really cool that even in death, that Elijah's life echoes Elijah's impact, but not in a way that it's like, I'm Elijah 2.0. He still had
Yes.
the freedom to be Elisha. That was still part of his story, but he was so shaped by Elijah that there's that mirroring in their story. It's cool.
No, it really is. And there's some things that we can look at and glean uh from this relationship
Hmm.
and everything from Elisha's point of view. Like
Mm.
he served before he led.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he was known for pouring water on hands came before calling down miracles and throwing salt
Mm.
into things and parting the river and all of that. Like he served and he learned.
Yeah.
And
He probably made some campfire dinners,
yeah,
like practical, like chores. I'm sure.
like go get the lentil.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
it's dinner time.
Yeah.
Like and all of that. He imitated before he
Mm.
innovated. He the first thing he did was try to replicate something that Elijah did.
Mm.
Just to make sure that he could still do it, and then from then on, like he had his own freedom and way of doing things because
Yeah.
you don't want to be. He didn't want to be, or you shouldn't want to be that person.
Yeah.
Like whoever your role model is or whoever is mentoring you. Like you shouldn't want to be that person because God made that person, and he
Yep.
made you He made you.
Yeah. Ooh, there's a really good quote from, I can't remember. It's a rabbi, and it's an old quote. I can't think of the rabbi's name. But basically the point of the statement is to say you're not going to get to heaven and be asked, why were you not Abraham? Why were you not Moses? Why were you not Elijah? If I'm being asked, why were you not Michael? Why were you not Brian Hughes? When I get to heaven, I'm going to be there's the possibility of me being pushed back on, why were you not the truest version of yourself that I created you to be?
Love it.
God is not expecting me to measure up to a certain measuring stick other than just being me.
Why weren't you the Madison that you were supposed to be?
Yeah. Which there's a great quote that summarizes that in a beautiful way from a talented speaker and rabbi. But my summary will have to do for now.
No, but I mean that's cutting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that is cutting, especially if you know what you're supposed to do, or we know as followers of Jesus, we have the Holy Spirit living in our heart.
Mm-hmm.
We have his prompts and guidance and his continual teachings
Mm-hmm.
to us. So if you know what you're supposed to do, and why didn't you? I've said that something similar to that to my kids all the time.
Yeah.
Why didn't you do what you were supposed to do? What you knew you were supposed to do?
Yeah.
Imagine the Lord shouting that at you, like,
Crazy.
"Oh my heavens!" Like,
yeah. But I think
I just got a little something right there.
How often do we cause ourselves hiccups in our own journey with imposter syndrome when we're not you can't be an imposter of being yourself. Like if who you're trying to be is the truest version of you, then you literally can't be an imposter
because you're being you.
So if we stop trying to force ourselves to be other people, then maybe we wouldn't struggle with imposter syndrome as much when we're facing new challenges.
Man,
I'm preaching to the choir here because I really struggle with imposter syndrome. So easier said than done, but I'm hoping that head knowledge turns to heart knowledge soon.
So and he didn't just carry out what Elijah did. He really leaned into the spirit of what he was trying to do, which was be faithful to the calling that God gave him. Yeah. I mean, we all have our own individual callings. My calling isn't the same as Madison's. She's called to live out Jesus's work in her own unique way, and I'm called to do it in the way that the Lord has called me specifically to, and that is the same for everybody else. Yeah. He didn't just copy what Elijah did. He carried the mission forward. Yeah. But in his own voice, in his own style of miracles, in his own way that he was uniquely created to do.
And I sort of feel like a little bit that God's sense of humor is the similarity in names. I feel like that's just God kind of showing up haha.
I'm going to tongue tie everybody whenever they talk about him.
This is going to be the perfect example for people to turn to when they're looking for mentor and mentee, and I'm going to make the names so close. But they're not, he's not trying to be Elijah just because his name is similar. He's still being himself, and I just think that's really cool.
Yes. Yeah. So on the back end of this, I know that I've been mentored specifically by people for specific things. Yeah. I do have people that if I'm trying to learn or grow in a certain way, I have specific people in my life that I can ask how to do these things. Yeah. Have you ever been mentored by somebody?
I have. I've gone through some different seasons of different focus in mentorship by folks. So I mentioned in the last episode that I was an intern when I first came on staff here at PCC. It was in an internship role. Mm-hmm. And that at the time it was very, very, it was mostly practical, equipping me with the information of how to do a lot of boring technology things that it's not boring. It's important, but it's not something I can dive into too much without worrying that I'll lose people who are not interested. But the practicalities of how to lead worship with the resources that you need, how to get people who are on your team the information that they need to be able to prepare themselves, and then also just what is the culture of worship here at Passion Community Church. So I got that really under my belt in a season of intentional internship in a way that was really cool, because I was underneath someone in particular who was really really great at teaching. So that I would consider that to be a phase of being mentored. And then I feel like I'm in one right now. Again, with worship, I for some of you who may have been watching for a while, I've mentioned before that my role is in tech, but I just switched roles pretty recently. So I'm coming from the tech world back into the worship world, and learning a lot along the way. So Beth Stoddard, who I feel like we talk about all the time on this podcast
Yeah.
because we both love her and she's awesome. She's really taking a mentor-mentee role with me, particularly in the worship world right now. So I get to live out what is it like to sit and watch and learn as much as I can in these spaces, while also still I'm not taking the back seat because it's still my job and I'm still
Yeah.
in charge. I'm coming to her for guidance as much as possible in a way that is really rewarding to learn from her. And if anybody knows her that's watching, she's like so much fun to
Yes.
learn from. So it's a unique season for me right now where this kind of really hits home in a fun way.
So how did you go about finding yourself in those types of relationships? Did you go to her and say, "Hey, I would really like if we could have some intentional time and discussions together for this," and going back to your initial internship,
Yeah.
whenever you were learning like practical things in the worship world and all of that, how did those relationships start?
Um, both of them started with me asking. I think the internship role in particular was started off with me sort of just sharing like, hey, I love being involved. I'll be scheduled any Sunday. I think when I first started serving here at PCC on the worship team, I went well over a year serving every Sunday because I loved it so much, with the exception of there was like one Sunday that I was moving or something and I was so like torn up that I couldn't be there that week. But it was just me raising my hand as much as possible and saying, I'm excited by this. I'm enjoying what I'm learning. I would like the opportunity to do more. And it slowly just morphed as time went on to me being able to practically assist somebody with some sort of menial tasks like Elisha was doing initially for Elijah, with like the back end of how we get like Ableton sets ready for worship, and like
Okay.
going super deep into planning center and like helping reorganize and cull old files, stuff like that. So it was a lot of, hey, I really want to. Do you have anything for me? And then sort of just waiting and seeing of is there anything that I can be involved in. The mentorship that I have going on right now with Beth is a little bit more. It was sort of handed to me to like help me feel a little bit more capable. So this role that I've stepped into in worship, I was actually I was asked if I would change roles, and I was like, "Are you crazy?" Because I didn't feel I didn't imposter syndrome. Didn't feel like I was capable of doing it. And Beth and I already have formed a relationship before, and I knew she really knows what she's doing. She can help support me practically as I start this. But also, there is so much that she knows. She's been on staff here for, I think, almost 20 years.
It's been a long time.
It's, if not already 20 years, it's close to 20 years. So she knows what she's doing. And I just want to put myself in any situation where I can learn from her. And I also, I feel like I take that mindset into a lot of meetings with me too, where she might be there, it might be somebody else. But I'm around these folks who have led this church for decades at this point, and I get to just sit and watch and learn what decisions are they making, why are they making the decisions that they're making, and how can I, like squirrel this away in my brain for when I might be responsible for a decision that is this important. So I'm not chomping at the bit to make these big decisions
Yeah.
because I know the weight that they carry, but I can sit and learn along the way while other people speak into things.
And when you're in those types of environments, watching and listening for what questions are asked
Yeah.
is probably one of the biggest things, because if you know what questions to ask, you'll know what information is gleaned from it.
Yep.
And so that was one of the things that I did the most. For me, I've been like I said, I have specific areas where I do seek specific people out. So whenever I first came on, I was mentored a lot by Brian Hughes, is taking me on any pastoral meetings that he was doing. He did a lot of that for me. He invited me to ask questions of him, and then he would just kind of turn you loose a little bit over time. He's very good at that. Whenever it comes to initiating different difficult conversations and learning how to manage people, Lenny, who has been here before, he is awesome at that.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm usually good once I find myself in a conversation that's kind of difficult. I'm okay. Like, I'm pretty good at that. But getting it started is not always easy.
I can relate to that for sure.
There's an art to starting them.
Oh, yeah.
And he is exceptionally good at that. And so, and then whenever I first became a campus pastor here, I intentionally sought out Angie Frame, because she had been doing it for a lot longer than me. And her and I both have kind of similar personalities. And so I learned a lot from her. She allowed me to ask questions. I'd say, hey, I'm dealing with this. How would you handle it? Have you ever encountered anything like this in the past? And so one of those is just a willingness to recognize that you don't know what you don't know.
Oh.
And if there are people around you, I've never had somebody say, if I've gone to them and said, hey, would you mind talking through this with me? Can I ask some questions? I've never had anyone just say, egads, no, and be gone with you. Like, I've never had, I'm not saying it's not a risk. It could happen, but I've never had anybody do that.
Yeah.
Most people, if you are willing to ask them for their advice on something, most folks are willing to do that.
I think about how we can see, like, Elijah initiated the handoff with Elisha by, coming up to him, from the woods, like with creeping with his cloak to put it over his shoulders. That's a very unique situation. To have something be established so in such a dramatic, sudden way. But I still think, like, we can learn. Elisha still had to make the choice to participate.
Yes.
Because he was the one that said, let me go say goodbye to my parents. So, like, he still had to choose to participate. So I think it can be really easy for us to think, oh, if someone would just mentor me, oh, if someone would just come along and pour into me, that would be great. But I think a lot of times we have to put ourselves in the position where we're willing to ask and say, this is where I notice myself not measuring up to where I would like to be eventually. And would you help me? And like you said, I genuinely think it would be a really weird situation for somebody to respond no to an ask like that, because I think people love teaching each other and helping grow each other. So, like, chances are very low that you're gonna get a no.
a be gone with you.
Yeah.
Like, I've not had it.
Yeah.
Whenever I went to Lenny, I mean, I went to him and said, hey, like, managing in this environment is radically different than what it looks like in the military. There's
I bet.
It just is. And so I went there and just said, listen, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
Help me to do this and do it well, because I've been called to this. Like, I recognize that. I believe that. But we're surrounded by people who, I mean, the role of a pastor, and especially if you're in vocational ministry, your role is similar to train and equip people to live out their calls in ministry. And so we're called to do that for one another. And so I mean, I sought that one out. The one with Hughes, that one was, I was invited to his turbo group. way back in 2014 or 15 or somewhere in
Mm.
there. And that's an intentional year-long thing that he does. And then the one with Frame, he kind of passed me to Frame and said, "Hey, this is somebody who's going to be coming on as a CP. I would love it if you mentored him and worked with him."
Mm.
And so, but it was great,
Yeah.
you know. And so,
Hmm.
you can't be afraid to just reach out and say, "Hey, this is an area I would like to grow in."
Yeah. I'm curious in along the way in these situations where you had purposeful asks of people, was there anything that you were able to do maybe like on your own that just kind of helped re-emphasize the growth that you were doing? So I think of situations like Global Leadership Summit. Our
Mhm.
staff goes to Global Leadership
Yeah.
Summit every year. Well, we don't go, but it's the live stream that we all attend, and we get to watch this event that is created for shaping leaders. And it's not, I mean, it's not quite a mentor mentee situation, but it is putting yourself in a seat where you're learning from people who know different things than you in a way that can grow you. Is there anything similar to GLS or like a book or something that was shaped you in that process while you were also being intentionally mentored by other people?
Um, I mean, not a specific one.
Mm.
I do read a lot, and
Yeah.
so there's most of my growth just came from trying to model
Mm.
what I had learned and then being willing to actually go out and try it.
Yeah.
That's where, I mean, you can have a whole lot of head knowledge, but if you're not actually willing to go through the uncomfy feelings of
Mhm.
I'm actually going to go out and try to do the thing,
Yeah.
you're not going to you're not going to grow
Yeah.
because your all growth comes from some sort of discomfort.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're called growing pains for a reason.
Yeah.
And so, just watching and then being willing to actually go out and try.
Mm. Did you have any like conversations? So I know for me when I'm thinking of being sort of like stretched in an uncomfortable way as far as like growth goes, sometimes I need some accountability behind me to make sure like, hey, did you actually do the thing that you said you were going to do even though it's uncomfortable? Did your mentors ever provide some level of accountability
Oh,
for
we
you?
would after action review.
Hmm.
I would come to them with an issue, and or I'll use one with Lenny. So I knew that I was going to have to have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Went to him and said, "Hey, this is the situation. This is what needs to be discussed. I'm angry at this person as well.
Mm.
How can help me game plan like how to actually go in and have this conversation with them."
Mm.
And then we sat down, we role played it a little bit. We came up with
Did you have like if A then B, if B then C?
a
Like
little bit for this.
Okay,
And
cool.
and then whenever I got done, we was like, "All right, here we go." I went, scheduled the meeting, had the meeting, and then he and I got together and talked about how it went.
Cool.
And so, I mean, if you have a really good relationship with the person that's mentoring you,
Mm.
they're going to say, "How did it go?
Yeah.
Did you do the thing?" And
Mm.
if they really care about you and you say no, they're going to say, "Well, why not?" And
Yeah.
then you're going to have to own up to it.
Yeah.
Because at some point, I mean, they're making an investment of time in you. If you're not actually going to do the things,
Yeah. What's the point?
then what's the point?
Yeah. Then you're just walking around with an inflated brain.
Yeah.
And no actual fruit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that's looked like. That's what that's looked like for me anyway.
That's cool. I've had a couple of situations where I know that I'm walking into an uncomfortable area for me, and it's also I think we're just similar. So it also happens to be where it might hold conflict with another person. That's usually what the uncomfortable space is for me. And I've had that follow up of let me know when you have the conversation because
Yeah.
this needs to happen. Or, hey, do you want to talk it through ahead of time? with somebody else. I'm not good off the cuff, so I like being able to sort of have a space to kind of rehearse where I want to grow myself when it's not right in that moment.
Yeah.
That's a very helpful thing that I have leaned on Beth for in the past quite a few times.
Well, it's so different in a ministry environment.
Yeah.
Because you do have to hold people accountable. Like your yes has to be yes and your no has to be no. And if it's not, you have to be comfortable saying, like, what's up?
Yeah.
Like and getting it going. Like you can't just ignore things. So that was the biggest one for me. 'Cause it's just my collar says this, so you have to do this. Like that doesn't work here.
Yeah. Nope.
No,
I don't know that there's many spaces where that does work outside of the military.
But so I thought this was great. Where do you want to land on this? What's your big takeaway?
I guess I would I would really love if there's somebody who is watching this and they feel like there is no one for them to turn to learn from, that there's always somebody here for you. So if you feel like there's a missing piece in your life of someone who is willing to pour into you, then reach out to us, because it may not be us. We might not be the right fit, but we've got a lot of people around here that care deeply about other people growing in the ways that they want to grow in. And if you do feel like there's someone in your life that is really smart or really good at something that you want to be really good at, just name it. Just be willing to ask them to pour into you. And if there's no structure to it, maybe be willing to set up some structure of, can we meet once a week, or can we meet once every couple weeks, or can we go through this book together? Nothing good ever happens by accident, usually.
You have to have a plan.
Yeah. So be willing to be the one to make the plan. It might be scary and it might feel like you're annoying the other person, but you're not. It's a necessary part of growth and leadership. And
one of the best ways that you could broach that conversation is just say, hey, one of the things I see in you is you are really amazing at this.
Yeah.
And it is something that I would really like to get better at as well. Would you be willing to, kind of coach me and help me get better at that thing?
Yeah.
That's one of the easiest ways to do it. And it lets them know that you paid attention and you noticed this thing about them, which is always flattering.
Yeah.
and two, it puts you in a space where you're actively saying, hey, I want to get better at this. And so for you, I think about this psychologically. For me, whenever I went and said something similar to Lenny, it was like, I don't know it all. Like I don't know it all. I need some assistance in this. And sometimes just saying that out loud makes it a little bit more true for you.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
So love it.
Good
all right.
stuff.
So like, share, subscribe, all the things. It really does help us out. If you leave us a review, we will send you an awesome After Chat mug. And we'll see you back here next week for another episode of the After Chat.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for the After Chat. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To be the first to hear our next episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button and get notifications for new content. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram at PCC Wired and Facebook at Passion Community Church. For additional resources and links, check out the description. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on The After Chat.